Hello and welcome back. When I last spoke, I was giving an update on Fong and his recent allegations of abuse at Gage. At the time, I was in the middle of working on a few different projects, but I've decided to delay some of them and focus on this one in particular. Fong, without a doubt, is one of the most historical USAG coaches who's been with both the USGF and the USAG through all of the controversy before and after Nasser. He's the only coach who has had two elite level gymnasts die under his watch, which is very threatening to many, during and after these tragedies, of course. Even today, many people believe that he is a dangerous coach who should be banned for life. Others believe that he is a positive light in the right direction, since many other coaches still fat shame and ignore injuries. In a recent meet, you can see Lian Wang being taped for an ankle injury and being dismissed from certain events by Fong. But in the same meet, you may recall him being reported to Safe Sport for a rather inappropriate comment on a video. So which is it? Is Fong a changed man who doesn't fat shame and supports people like Simone Biles for pulling out of the twisties? Or is Fong a bad man who ignored Ivana Hong's injury and still verbally abuses gymnasts, as discussed in Little Girls in Pretty Boxes? I'll let you decide as we go through my most recent project, the Fong timeline. This timeline is also a platform to understand eating disorders and how difficult the recovery process is. This is a trigger warning section because it does discuss behaviors of disordered eating that may not be appropriate for everyone. In 1975, after graduating from Louisiana State with a college scholarship in gymnastics, Al would travel around to Arkansas and began coaching at a training center in Rogersville. In 1977, Christy Henrich starts gymnastics. That same year, Fong moves to Kansas City after a friend offers him a job at a local gym. Fong works at Lee Summit Flyers in Missouri as a coach. He coaches many girls, including Christy Henrich, and another who recently wrote a story about her experience on WebMD in 2022. In 1979, Gage opens its first original gym. When he does this, he cuts ties with the Lee Summit Flyers for violating his promise not to open a competing gym. He takes some gymnasts from Lee Summit Flyers, including Christy Henrich. I found this older article archived that discusses more. Then, about 2 years later, Fong visited a friend in Kansas City. He decided to stay and began coaching for his buddy's gymnastic club in Lee Summit. Later, the pair had a falling out, and Fong had suddenly become a nomadic coach with about 150 kids in town. One parent, Tom Reese, offered some business advice to the young coach. Tom told me, "Look at it like this. If you want the American dream, the house, the car, but you're never going to have it on a coach's salary," Fong said. That just made something in my head click. I finally quit thinking about the coach's mentality that, in order to win, everything must be sacrificed. In 1979, Reese and a colleague, Dick Boris, chipped in $2,500 each and helped Fong secure $15,000 small business administration loan that he used to rent a small building in Blue Springs and to furnish it with minimal amount of equipment. Thus, Great American Gymnastics Express was born. In 1980, Kathy Rigby, after a 12-year battle, finally comes to terms with her eating disorder and wins the battle. Kathy is one of the first gymnasts to come forward about the disease and almost passes away from it. From 1980 on, she tries her best to educate others on warning signs during the meets, but little is done in the organization for change. In 1982, the gymnastic community would witness its first gymnastic death related to mental health. Norwegian's Helga Rathen passes away from anorexia nervosa, contributed by the culture of being thin to win in gymnastic standards. As the years pass of Christie's gymnastic career, she begins to become more involved in the climate of gymnastics. According to her therapist, she begins to watch protein and fat on labels of food like cereal boxes as far back as the age of 9. Fong states that her work ethic was legendary, but although it was legendary, it was not enough for her. She continuously tries to impress him. As she gets more involved in gymnastics, she focuses less on her family's opinions and time. she dedicates most of her childhood time to gymnastics, besides going to public school. Almost all of her free time was either training at Gage or studying for school. In her opinion, she takes attention away from her brother Paul when it comes to her parents. She feels guilty at times for her parents, taking more time to focus on her though, and regrets it from time to time. In one story that her therapist shared, she got mad at her mother once when she was driving her to practice. Her mother was fighting a severe migraine and shouldn't have been driving. At one point during the drive, she had to pull over so she could throw up. Christy later got mad at her for pulling over to throw up because she was worried it would make them late for practice. Christy makes the junior national team. While on the junior national team, current president Kathy Kelly recalls gymnasts on the national team attending occasional nutrition information sessions, including Christy Henrich. During that time, Christy begins to gain more attention as a gymnast. Her coach, Al Fong, stated that there was a determination about her, a fire in her eyes, that attitude that said, "Hey, I can do this. Just watch me." She had a poor back alignment, just born with it. She didn't learn skills quickly, almost a learning dyslexia, but with all the obstacles, she was overcome by sheer work ethic. She was good at gymnastics. July 1987. While at the Olympic Festival meet, Karen Turney, Jr., gets injured performing a Yurchenko vault. She misses her hands on the vault and falls on her head. 1 year later, she places second in an international meet. Fong states that during the injury, him and her family tried to be very patient and slow her down on training since she was anxious to get back into competing. While on holiday in Texas in the late 1980s, Fong stumbles upon a crude gymnasium filled with outdoor playground equipment. On their way back to Kansas City, Fong envisions a market for an essentially self-service sports fun center that would require little overhead, minimal staffing, and the potential for huge profit. Fong ran his idea by his friend Ron, whom Fong said was equally mesmerized. The two then mapped out a plan, designed their own equipment, and gathered some investors. With $250,000, they bought an 8,000 square foot facility in Lenexa and opened the first Discovery Zone indoor playground. On March 18th of 1988, Christy competes at the Hungarian International in Budapest. At the meet, she attends a luncheon with Al Fong and others, including well-renowned Olympic judge Greta Treiber. Treiber, who had international experience as a judge, was asked by Fong for advice on the upcoming games. Treiber told Christy that unfortunately, you aren't the right body fit for the Olympic team. Al said in that moment both he and Christy felt devastated. "I know that, Judge," Fong said. "She isn't mean. The media got it wrong." The judge, Greta, never called Christy fat. She was comparing her body to Romanian and Soviet Union gymnasts who had success because the international judges favored slim bodies. Greta believed that she had less of a chance of making the team because she was not the ideal body weight, similar to somebody like Mary Lou Retton. I can't believe, when referring to claims, that Greta came right out and said, "Christy, you're fat." But that's the way that Christy took it. She took it to heart, way down deep. She could never get rid of it, Fong recalled years later. While on the trip, Christy constantly asked Al if he thinks she was fat. Al stated, every 5 minutes. The rest of the trip, she asked, "Al, do you think I'm fat?" She wasn't, of course, but the seed was planted. This statement has been confirmed in over 3 different interviews. While finishing up on the trip, Christy began to eat small salads and healthier options in lower quantities. Upon arriving home from Budapest, Christy immediately told her mother, Sandy, at the airport that she needed to lose weight. Her mother recalls, she was 4'11" and 95 pounds without an ounce of fat in her body. She was beautiful. I cannot find any video to this day of this meet. It's as if the USGF pretended the meet never happened. They also have refused to provide results from this meet on the USAG website and FIG. May 5th, 1988. While in Japan, Jalissa competes at the World Sports Fair. On her second day, she competes while injured. Because of the injury, Fong spots her at the other side of the vault table near the mat. Jalissa vaults, missing one foot on the springboard during warm-ups. This lacks enough height and velocity to compete a Yurchenko. The Yurchenko sends Jalissa over the table, leaving Fong stunned. She goes out of consciousness and stops breathing, as recalled in the New York Times. Fong leaves the arena with family stunned. He stated, "While I was waiting for Jalissa's parents to arrive in Japan, I sat in my hotel room and questioned why I'm in the sport and what my motivation is. Is it worth risking someone's life for a life-risking skill?" Shortly after Jalissa's accident, her mother, Ottilia, wrote a letter to the gymnastics community urging gymnasts to continue their quest for Olympic victory with the same spirit Jalissa had shown. In the article, Ottilia stated, "If your spirit is true and your dream sincere, you will achieve greatness for giving it your all." June 1988, with the help of Fong and the Missouri community, funds of $14,000 are raised to help aid Jalissa's medical bills from her injuries that were sustained in Tokyo. As the gymnastics season continues, gauge gymnasts like Christy dedicate the season to Jalissa. Fong said that his gymnasts were struggling to cope. They began re-evaluating and analyzing with him of what they were doing. More so, the parents than the children, because the children are more resilient. A few parents considered pulling their children out of the sport, but they changed their minds. But in looking back, I can't think of any one gymnast on the team who contemplated quitting because of Jalissa. They were far more concerned of Jalissa than of themselves. At that age, kids, they think they're invincible. August 4th, 1988, less than 4 months of listening to Greta's comment that she is not the right body type, Christy takes this comment as advice to lose weight. Christy becomes a secret anorexia nervosa victim. She begins to binge on fast food and purge when alone. Some days she would consume only one meal a day, down to a meal consisting of just an apple. She fails to make the '88 Olympic team, blaming it on herself for not losing enough weight. She feels she is a disappointment to not only herself, but to her coach, Al, for letting him down, along with her family, for all the sacrifices they made for her to win. She sets her eyes on 92 and makes it more of a goal to lose weight than to improve on her gymnastics. While she motivates herself to continue, she feels strong regret, which battles more into her eating disorder. She feels she not only failed herself, but also Al Fong for not making the Olympic team. He tried everything to get her to make the team, and yet, although he did everything, in her eyes, she didn't do everything. He was a good enough coach, but she was not a good enough gymnast. That's what she thought about herself. Her therapist would say years later, when you don't feel good about yourself, and you have a lot of shame, then the subconscious acting out of that is to punish yourself in some way. In April 1989, Christy gets injured during warm-ups at the McDonald's Challenge. In July 6, 1989, while Christy struggles to cope with her best friend, Jalissa's deteriorating health, Christy places second at national championships, with Brandy placing first. Her eating disorder gets worse though, and this is her best meet that she has on national television. On October 18th of 1989, Christy qualifies for Worlds, but Al Fong notices something's odd. "I started noticing hints of a problem in 1989 when she was struggling, having trouble finishing skills that 6 months ago she could do without blinking an eye." Christy's peak came from the 1989 championships and the 1989 Worlds. However, her performance deteriorates shortly after championships. She makes the world team, but struggles at the '89 trials. She shows signs of an eating disorder, like blinking constantly, shaking arms off, and looking like she was lightheaded during performances. Christy is weak and tired in events, especially in her floor exercise, where she lands on her head on 2 of her 3 tumbling passes. An official questions Fong's methods, and Fong calls the USGF for help after the meet when he questions if she has an eating disorder. When she returned from the World Championships, her temperament had changed, where she was having fits of rage and frustration. It got really strange, Fong recalled. It was really not good for the rest of the kids, but especially not good for Christy, because she was going to hurt herself physically, the way she was throwing herself around, he stated. She'd say, "I can't do it," and she'd jump down, start crying, slam herself down on the ground in a rage. She would go into tantrums over her disgust at not being able to do something. This was totally uncharacteristic of Christy. She had difficulty recovering from a stress fracture, and her strength decreased. Fong, searching for everything and anything that might solve the problem, found research on eating disorders in which symptoms mirrored some of Christy's behavior. He began closely observing her when the team made out. I started seeing that she was only eating an apple while the rest of the kids were eating potatoes and pasta, he said. That's when I started saying, "Man, we've got a problem here." Fong knows that he wasn't blameless. When Henrich began losing weight, he offered compliments. We started seeing her really trim up, and we kept saying, "Wow, Christy, you look great." Judges and other gymnasts echoed the praise. That was all the kind of reinforcement that would keep encouraging this type of behavior, Fong said. But we didn't know. We had no idea. When he confronted his star gymnast, she broke down and started crying. I said, "Hey, Christy, it's not too late. Let's work together, and let's solve this thing. I don't know how to do it because, well, I'm not the professional. But let's call up the people that can do something about it." Fong contacted the psychologist and nutritionist for the national team, who phoned Henrich and her parents and set them up to see experts in Kansas City. Fong also approached Henrich's parents. Then Henrich's were shocked. They had no idea this was taking place, Fong recalled. In a short time, span of under 2 years, Fong would try to get help by admitting her to a residential treatment 3 times for her eating disorder. All 3 times, she would reject treatment or discharge herself. November 1989. A Times article discusses the complications of the Yurchenko, discussing those who are against it and have had accidents beyond Jalissa. The article discusses how the Yurchenko is currently banned by NCAA and Level 10s through the USGF, and how some gyms refuse to perform it. Bill Sands performs a study on the vault, questioning its safety. Others, like Don Peters, say that it isn't any more dangerous than the 30 to 40 other gymnastic maneuvers that they perform, but that it should still be approached cautiously. Coaches like Kelly Garrisons say that they still worry about the vault even though their gymnasts perform it safely. Christy Henrich also recalls in later years that she too was afraid of the Yurchenko. There were a lot of kids that were scared of this vault. Christy copes while hanging a picture of Jalissa in the mirror of her bathroom, making the mission of the 92 Olympics no longer for just her and others, but also for Jalissa. In July 1990, Christy's last big meet is at the U.S. Championships, yet she is barely featured in coverage. She places 10th, recently recovering from mononucleosis for a second time. Returning to train from the sickness in June, the USGF may have picked other gymnasts to discuss, since they felt she may not have been healthy enough to place high. Christy still qualifies for additional meets though, given her successful 1989 year. In April 18th of 1990, Christy had a successful 1989 career that she qualifies for the USA vs. USSR international meet. During an uneven bar practice in Oregon, Al notices that she is too weak to compete a full routine. Christy had a history of catching mononucleosis. Although she had a history, he starts to notice that her constant weakness, especially at this meet, isn't related to the mono. Christy Henrich, though having a previous successful year, is pulled out of the USSR vs. USA challenge by Al because she is too weak. He is worried about her health. As months pass, Al Fong eventually kicks her out of the gym at the end of the 1990 season. He does this out of love, as a last resort to help her gain weight. He stated, "Christy, we can't do this. You are not eating. I love you, but I can't let you train." At the end of the season, she was struggling to complete routines in practice, and he was worried about her safety. Christy takes it as a personal attack instead of incentive to get herself healthy again. He stated that she can return to the gym once she is at a healthy weight. January 9th, 1991. Christy announces to the Kansas City Star that she is retiring from gymnastics. "I was just burned out, tired of doing it every day," Christy said. At the time, Fong stated he hadn't seen Christy in the gym for 3 months and hadn't officially been told that she retired until being interviewed by the Star. Christy stated to another article that she had never had a blow-up with Fong when referring to retirement, but that she did notice he wasn't himself after he pulled her out of the 1990 meet when they returned home. Fong stated that he would be supportive of her decision to retire and that she has so much to be proud of, like what she did at Worlds back in 1989. There are many articles discussed this month, constantly talking about Christy's health and retirement, and here's another one. Though Christy is getting help from parents, Fong, and professionals, she still refuses to believe that she has an eating disorder. "I don't have an eating disorder. I don't. Christy stated, as tears streaked down the conviction of her words. Her therapist once said that a sign was her constantly loving to cook, but not eating like everyone else. "That's one of the symptoms of people with an eating disorder," her therapist, Vaughn, said. "They'll go out of their way to feed other people, but they don't feed themselves." The sight and smells of the food teased and taunted Christy and set up so many more problems. "Come on, have another piece of pie!" And all the times inside, wanting it for herself, but denying it, or taking it and not being able to stop with one piece, and after eating 2 or 3, going to vomit or use a lot of laxatives. Her boyfriend, Beau, recently changed to fiancé, held frustration with the organization. He recalled in an interview that the commentators applauded Christy for losing weight in 1989 and 1988. He was disgusted since it encouraged her to continue to restrict calories. She felt shame about having the disease, and that she couldn't be the woman Beau wanted her to be. Beau didn't put any of this message in her. He loved her unconditionally. Her therapist once stated, but that's what she viewed when the eating disorder got worse. August 8th, 1991, Christy Henrich's best friend, Julissa Gomez, passes away. Christy's eating disorder gets worse. The USA Gymnastics magazine mentions Julissa's death in their October issue, a small section on the bottom left on page 34. The insensitive tribute is overshadowed on the page by that year's Hall of Fame inductees. You can blink and miss the section of Julissa. Christy struggles with her best friend's death. December 31st, 1991. Christy's health decline with the eating disorder. Although planned to get married to Beau, Christy does not get married on the planned date of December 31st, 1991. An article that year discusses Sandy's point of view on things. Sandy states on blame, "It's not only Al, but it's also the system," referring to the USGF. It also includes that Sandy stated Christy blames herself for a lot of things, including her relationship with Beau. Sandy also states that she had no limits in the gym. If Fong said to do 10 beam routines, she'd do 30. That's probably why she reached the level that she reached. But that can be destructive too. During the interview, it states a short discussion between Sandy and Christy, where Christy states that her mother should not be proud of her medals. "The accomplishments mean nothing," Christy claims. "To you they don't, but to me, I'm proud of them. I think you've done great," she replies. "All these international competitions I've been to, it was never my dream. My dream was the Olympics. I feel like a failure." Sometime in 1992, Al Fong sells his former locations of Discovery Zone, which profits over $400,000. Discovery Zone was a similar strategy to what he now has brought back as Bump City. In early 1992, Christy's parents check her into St. Joseph Health Center, Independence. She is 60 pounds and gains weight from IV fluids being pumped into her body. She loses weight after gaining it at St. Joseph. This same year, Nancy Marshall, former Olympian, becomes vice president of USAG's Women's Board and begins to create the Athlete Wellness Program. She quickly becomes engulfed in helping Christy, since she is too battled with an eating disorder while in the elite sport. Nancy works with Kathy Rigby and Bill Sands, along with many dietitians, sports psychologists, and parents. Because the amount of resources and the time, the Athlete Wellness Program officially goes into effect January 1st of 1996 and not 1992. Some support Nancy, like the USOC and CBS, who request to use her work and knowledge for other awareness programs when it comes out in 1996. The Athlete Wellness Handbook is also published shortly after, but with struggle. April 1992, Christy finally admits that she has an eating disorder after realizing that her problems at the 1990 USA vs. USSR was more severe than her past struggles with mononucleosis. During the 1992 Olympics, Christy checks in and out of hospitals because of her eating disorder. Her family shows frustration when they watch the Olympics, seeing bony gymnasts like Shannon Miller on TV. Christy, on the other hand, gets motivated and considers training for the 96 Games. She calls Fong, who says that she cannot train for the 96 Olympics until she gains weight. He would welcome her back with open arms once she gains weight. She never calls him again after the conversation. December of 1992, Sandy Henrich grows worried about medical bills. She contacts Kathy Kelly, stating she needs help related to a disease. She doesn't specify what the disease is, but that they almost lost their child in the hospital after she was weighing less than 70 pounds. Kathy returns the call, and they begin to put together a luncheon benefit to help with medical bills. In early 1993, Christy spends 6 weeks in an eating disorder ward, Menninger Clinic, Topeka, Kansas. Her family moves her back to Independence, Missouri, when treatment doesn't improve. While home, she is forced tube feed with IV assistance. Her potassium levels get so low, specifically 2.4, which a healthy level is between 3.5 to 4, that she was at a high risk of passing away from anorexia cardiac arrest. Because of her near-death experience from low potassium levels, she is again checked in to seek help by her parents. She is sent to Cedar Ridge Hospital in Shawnee Mission, Kansas. Insurance funding becomes scarce, and USAG helps organize a fundraiser to pay for her medical bills, set to take place in August. June 1993, Al Fong visits Henrich at Cedar Ridge Hospital. He states that because she was so unhealthy that she looked like a skeleton. In the same month, a local fund in Missouri is established to help pay for Christy's medical expenses. While at this hospital, which costs up to $1,000 per day, another fund for Christy is set up by the Association for Youth Athletes, which is based out in Texas. During that time, USAG President Mike Jackie refused to let USAG be blamed for Christy's eating disorder. He stated in June 13th, "Our basic responsibility is to support our ongoing athletes and our programs. We do have a hardship program for competing athletes that qualify for funding due to injury or illness. Christy would not qualify for this, though, since it expires after 6 months of not competing. Maybe in 1991, when this was developing and we had been made aware of it, we might have been in a more proactive position to help." Mike Jackie also quoted to contend that athletes ignore good nutrition until they are in the clutches of the disease, which applies to non-athletes as well. At the end of the article, Jackie concludes that he would have immediately contacted the athlete's parents, referring to Christy specifically, if they found out she had an eating disorder. On August 14th of 1993, a fundraising luncheon held by USAG is held for Christy. People like Nancy Marshall and Al Fong host the luncheon in her honor. Christy is checked out of Cedar Ridge Hospital for the day to attend this luncheon. Aside from the luncheon, a clinic was also to be hosted by Gage. The clinics were held by Al at 8 a.m. to 12:30 and 11:30 to 4 p.m. All clinics were sold out. 350 people attended, including Kim Zmeskal, Shelley Stack, Stephanie Woods, Sandy Woolsey, Kim Kelly, Shelley Eagle, Erica Stokes, Bart Connor, and Nadia Comaneci. Christie's fiancé Beau also records a song in her honor and sells the song for purchase. For each song sold, $3.25 goes towards her medical bills. During the fundraiser, over $20,000 was raised in 24 hours by the Kansas City Sports Commission. The goal of the fundraiser was to reach up to $100,000. The fundraiser brought in $34,000. Christie's counselor also attended the luncheon. She said at the luncheon that she wanted to live, but I could tell that she really didn't want to live. She loved the support from the luncheon, but deep down inside, it carried the support as a burden. No matter how well she was doing, the message she gave herself was that this wasn't enough and it wasn't okay. In fall of 1993, after spending 5 months at Cedar Ridge Hospital, Christie witnesses her only comeback to recovery. She experienced a second near-death experience when her weight drops to 52 pounds. She begins to fight the disorder while at Cedar Ridge and is finally discharged in the fall of 1993 after gaining 19 pounds. She throws her scale away and gains weight at home. When she begins to see less bone, she is triggered and begins to lose weight again. She begins to reject help again, including seeing her psychologist. December 25th of 1993, the Washington Post publishes its first article on Christie. In the Post, it discusses that she consumed up to an apple a day during practices, which on average is 95 calories. She stated, "I would never wish this upon my worst enemy." Sandy, her mother, stated, "Christie is a perfectionist. She was going to do whatever it took, no matter what the price." She was hearing this from a judge, an official in her sport. Why wouldn't you listen? In spring of 1994, Christie drops below 65 pounds, but still refuses medical attention. She becomes more frustrated and vocal about the sport and how it encourages eating disorders. She calls for reform in the way officials, coaches, and judges, and food and athletes. She blames the sport and the culture for why she got the eating disorder. Her fiancé Beau stated, "She hated this disorder just as much as everyone else did. She didn't want to be like this, and that was the hardest part, was watching it happen." In mid-1994, Christie speaks on Jerry Springer's show about her struggles with the disorder. She's also featured in a segment on Maury Poffitt's show. In May of 1994, Christie speaks with Joanne Ryan, author of Little Girls in Pretty Boxes. She states she has a goal to beat the disorder in the upcoming weeks, claiming that she wants her body back and to enjoy the summer healthy. She struggles to eat solid food because of her eating disorder, sipping primarily on soup and Carnation instant breakfast. She monitors the kitchen, preparing meals when she has free time that spring. In June of 1994, Christie's weight drops below 50 pounds, and she is admitted to St. Joseph Health Center in Independence, Missouri. The media becomes rampant on the story. Fans and family grow very concerned of her declining health. In June of 1994, Fong speaks with Joanne Ryan. He expresses his concerns of Christie's deteriorating health, claiming that he thinks she will pass away at a young age. He feels that while coping with a possible gymnast's death, that her family will try to sue him if she passes away, stating some of the responsibility falls on his coaching methods. That same month, Kathy Kelly, current president in the 90s, calls Christie Henrich to see how she is doing. She sounded good, because she was so good at hiding it. I believed her, because she was at home and not in the hospital. On the 4th of July of 1994, Christie is released from St. Joseph, then rushed 1 week later to Research Medical Center of Kansas City because of eating disorder complications, resulting in organ breakdown and disruption. On July 15, 1994, claims from Christie Henrich's therapist, Dr. Gail Vaughn of Liberty, states that Christie begins to stop going to see her for help. Because of this, and the struggle of medical bills, Dr. Gail Vaughn offers free counseling to Christie. On July 18th of 1994, Christie struggles to make it to her 22nd birthday because of her declining health. On July 24th, 1994, Christie slips into a coma because of her declining health. On July 26th of 1994, Christy Henrich passes away from multiple organ failure. On July 28th of 1994, the Washington Post is one of the first to break the news of Christy's recent passing, along with the New York Times. In the article from the Washington Post, Kathy Kelly, president at the time, states that the former USGF held occasional nutrition information sessions in the 1980s and that Christy attended them. "We thought we were informing her, but what we've learned through this tragedy is that it's not a nutritional issue as much as a psychological problem. It's a problem in society. It's not related to sports, but a girl's self-esteem." During the last phone call between Henrich and Kelly, she stated that she was writing some articles on her troubles and that Kelly would circulate them to all young gymnasts. Kelly never did this, even years later. On July 28th of 1994, in a Kansas City article, a former coach at Christie's, Diane Stockard, is interviewed. She was very hard on herself and her failures. She showed disappointment very openly. Her teammate, Gwen Spindle, recalled, "Everybody can blame themselves and say that I didn't help her enough, but we did. But it had to come from her, to heal herself. She'd say that she had it under control, and then she'd just go back down. It makes me cry to think about how strong and healthy she used to be. People looked up to her in the gym." On August 2nd of 1994, the St. Louis Post interviewed 3 gymnasts from Gage: Jessica, Jill, and Christy. Others, like former teammate Carrie Kelly, reflect on their admiration and achievements of Christy's. In this article, mixed conclusions are again made, where the article claims Christy overheard the comments from the judge in Budapest. Other articles state that she was pulled aside by the judge. Some that she asked for advice from the judge. Other articles state that the judge flat out said she was fat, and others that she can make the team if she loses weight. Diane Stockard, former coach of Christie's, is also interviewed again, saying that she tried to seek help and recommend a dietitian when Christy told her that she eats only 3 apples a day. This is the second coach from Gage to state that they had tried to seek help for Christy. It's as if she was proud of the 3 apples a day, proud of her control. When you think about it, Christy didn't have a lot of control. Her diet was one of the few parts of her life that she could control. Kathy Kelly is also interviewed, and she begins to advertise their new machines to measure bone density, like she told Joy and Ryan in Little Girls in Pretty Boxes. On August 8th of 1994, Sports Illustrated pays a respectful tribute to Christy Henrich, and the 8-page project discusses Christy's successful career, her struggle, and Sports Illustration frustration of her passing. In the article, a former USAG official states that the parents should have pushed harder for an intervention. The official adds that the Federation received no complaints from the family regarding her eating disorder. As a large organization, the writer of Sports Illustrated interviews various sports that have struggled with the disorder and promotes change to the sport by spreading awareness and trying to change the culture of body positivity. This same day, the St. Louis Post comes out with an article interviewing a former gymnast who met Christy at a gymnastics demonstration and looked up to Christy as a child growing up in the sport. Training at the Central Academy in Maryland, the gymnast Tricia also has her coach being interviewed. The coach, Scott, states that he looked up to Al not only as a mentor, but also as a friend. His gym in Maryland helped with the luncheon that went towards her medical bills. "The culture of gymnastics is to blame," Scott states, as he feels saddened for Al and her family. On August 21st of 1994, Al Fong speaks with the Associated Press. Al Fong stated, "I'm very sad, and I'm angry. I have a sense of helplessness. I've been watching something happen for several years, and even with everyone knowing about it, and all sorts of medical and psychological help, this happened." In the same month, Al Fong speaks on Barbara Walters' show about Christy's recent passing. Barbara Walters is accusing him of being responsible for her passing. Al Fong begins to reject public interviews because of interviews like Barbara Walters. He leaves the scene and stays quietly reserved, coping away from the spotlight. That's what some believe. And while this is somewhat true, it's also somewhat false. A claim from an ESPN article once stated, with his reputation tarnished, Fong was relegated to teach after-school programs. Season after season, as Fong went about his work, he burned up inside. Over time, though, a new man slowly bloomed. In exile, he came to see that his dreams belonged not to him, but to the girls. It is true that all Fong stopped training elites. However, not in the terms that people would think. Some of his elites dropped down to level 10 and went off to college, while others just quit the sport. He would start coaching elites again, but this wouldn't be until a couple years later. He still owned Gage. He still owned a branch of gymnastic facilities, and he was still somewhat involved in USAG, but not as much as he was before. September 29th, 1994. A music video titled I Believe in You by Bo Marino, previously sold for funds to go towards medical bills, is stated to be published to many network programs aimed to spread awareness. Some of these include NBC Dateline, ABC Worldwide Sports, and many others. Marino states in the article addressed to the Kansas City Star that this video was not intentionally recorded for commercial purposes. In October of 1994, USAG magazine discusses Christie's passing in a small segment on a fourth page. Just like Jalissa, it's a poorly done tribute to the gymnast, with other media platforms paying more attention to the passing than the organization themselves. There is no tribute to her in any national or international meet from USAG. Kelly Macy is interviewed a second time. She is interviewed by the LA Times regarding her life story of battling an eating disorder at the same time as Christie. She speaks at a local school educating young girls on eating disorders. Here's a snippet of the article. Young, bright, and talented, Kelly Macy was headed for world-class fame as a gymnast in her first year at the University of Georgia. She left school for summer vacation as the Southeastern Conference's Freshman of the Year. But by the time she returned to school that September, Macy didn't have the strength to do a simple handstand. On the summer of 1991, Macy, now 23, had become obsessed with losing weight, working out 8 hours a day and often eating as little as an apple slice or a piece of bread. She lost 30 pounds in an already slender frame. I did it just to lose a few pounds, and it became an addiction, she recalled. During her presentation, Macy spoke of the drive to succeed and the kinds of pressures that she and other gymnasts have been under to perform. She particularly focused on her friend, Christy Henrich. Henrich was an Olympic-caliber gymnast who died last summer. She weighed 60 pounds at the time of her death. Macy said that she too may have died if it hadn't been for a coach at the University of Georgia. Her coach immediately noticed Macy's 30-pound weight loss when she returned from school that semester after her freshman year. The coach barred Macy from competing and practicing, but forced her to attend practices and watch. The coach's wake-up call, as Macy recalls it, along with medication and therapy, led to her comeback. In her senior year, Macy won All-American honors. Macy then went on to graduate school, where she is studying sports management. One of the things that kept me going was Christie's memory. I want to show that there is a flip side to this, she said. March 1995. The Christy Henrich Foundation begins to provide more education to local communities, including Raytown South Middle School. In the program, which includes Bo Marino's music video, I Believe in You, her mother and family spread awareness on eating disorders. The foundation is sponsored with Humana and Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas City. June 1995. Al Fong opens another Gage location in Overland Park, which is the city that Lian Wong is currently from. This center is no longer around. I believe it was sold and is now owned by another gymnastic facility. If you look at the location, it matches Emerald City, which has been around for a while. This is when the idea of Bum City is created again, but is originally in Overland Park at the Gage location. At this time, an article discusses Christie's recent death 1 year prior. The Dragon's fierce level of training, up to 7 hours a day, combined with Fong's obsession with training champions, 10 Dragons have made the U.S. national team in recent years, which may have contributed to Henrich's death, some say. He staunchly denies it. It hurt at first, especially when you're not used to dealing with the press, Fong said, recalling the deluge of international media that descended upon him following Henrich's death. CNN, the BBC, the New York Times, they were all beating down my door, he said. But they were all painting the wrong picture. I wanted to scream, "I'm innocent! I'm the one who discovered it!" her anorexia, and tried to stop it. I never weighed her, not one day in her life. Fong said that ultimately the negative press didn't hurt his business, but validated him as a world-class coach. People seem to remember, but they only saw me on TV, Fong said. 1996. Al Fong meets Armin, his current wife, and they get married. It's at this time that people believe that Al Fong changes his harsh coaching methods and drops the bat attitude. She gave in to him, and it's the perfect gift. Just as there's a light and a dark in gymnastics, there are two sides to Fong, before and after he got married. She softened him up quite a bit, says Amanda Stroud, one of the first gymnasts to train with Fong before and after he got married. She made him see what he was doing. She made him think. Later on, it would be rumored that Amanda left after having an object thrown at her during practice by Al Fong. I don't have any solid evidence to back this up, and I've heard different stories that it was a springboard or another heavy object. This is speculation in my opinion, since I've only recently heard of this and have no solid evidence to back this up. I'm not doubting that it happened though, I just don't have anything to show you guys that it really happened and what exactly happened. February 21st of 1999. One of the last times Bo Marino is interviewed is by the Kansas City Star. In the interview, he states that he is writing a book about Christie's battle with anorexia that was unfinished when she died in 1994. He recently completed the book years after her death, titling it Precious Porcelain, The Life of Christie Henrich. 3 publishing houses offer to buy and purchase the book that holds 30 chapters, though Marino hadn't picked a publisher yet. She asked me to write the book if she died, and I promised her. In the article, he shares 2 pieces from the book. Here is one from chapter 17. I honestly think, if I would have known what I was doing to me, it wouldn't have mattered. I had worked my whole life to reach my dream, and by God, nothing was going to stop me from reaching it. From then on, meets no longer provide nutritional education and counseling to the public, like they had in the past with Nancy Marshall and Kathy Rigby. From there on, Christie's story is neglected, and little is done for change. Kathy Kelly states in numerous interviews that they have increased sports psychologists and nutritionists in the organization. This is ugly. We don't want to talk about sticking your finger in your mouth, but now we have to, she said in 1994. Kathy Kelly still blamed it on the culture of society and not on the pressure of gymnastics culture. Nancy Marshall's program, helping with eating disorder awareness and injury recovery, is severely cut by budgets with Bob Colarossi, Marta Caroli, and Bella Caroli. Nancy Marshall becomes so frustrated that she leaves the organization. Years later, Marta will speak in 2004, stating that the athlete wellness program was not necessary and was no longer needed. Marta, who is the team coordinator, would regularly encourage gymnasts like Bridget Sloan on live TV to lose weight. Kathy Kelly would continuously fat-shame gymnasts in the 90s and 2000s when she was a part of the organization. November 22, 1999. Fong discusses his career of owning his gym for 20 years with a local newspaper. In the article, they discuss Christie. There have been a lot of highs here, he said, picking his words carefully. But that was certainly the low. Fong was accused of mentally and physically demeaning his star student and was even ordered to stay away from her funeral by her distraught family. I was getting beat up by everyone, he said. I think I had more support locally, because people here knew that I would never do what everyone was saying I had done. But internationally, it was tough. He would get accosted in airports. People would say, "You're that coach, aren't you?" I would never abuse a student. How could I be a successful coach if I was abusing students? I know that a judge made a comment about Henrich's physique, and I don't know if that triggered the problem or not. Fong knows that whatever his student accomplished, he will always be associated with that tragic incident. But he says, with great assurance, I have a clear conscience. I can sleep at night because I know that I was not a part of that problem. Today, the gymnastic world seems to be smiling at Fong. I think he's the best coach in the country, said Diane Stockard, a teacher at the Great American Gymnastics Express. I don't know a lot of coaches who would care for his students or his staff as much as he does. Youngsters can travel all over the country to find a great coach, but local gymnasts, they have the best coach right in their backyard. The article ends discussing how he has two current junior elites by the names of Amanda Stroud and Taryn Humphrey. 2000. Amanda Stroud competes at the trials but does not make the team. 2001. This is when it's acclaimed that Amanda Stroud leaves Gage after having a heavy object thrown at her, like a chair or a springboard. June 30th, 2004. Al and Armin are honored as successful coaches and earn Coach of the Year award during the trials. Al and his wife are honored as successful coaches and earn Coach of the Year award during the Olympic trials. At the same time, McCool makes the Olympic team and Taryn qualifies to a training camp to compete for a spot. Sometime this year, Al Fong buys a new facility for his future gymnasts, but it didn't come easy. Even as McCool and Humphrey were Athens-bound in 2004, Fong walked the grass in the vacant lot next door to his gym, imagining a state-of-the-art gathering place for his sport. It has always been his gift, and his curse. Whether others see danger, he sees opportunity. According to the article, maybe this time everyone was right. In April, with creditors hounding Fong, his gym, his girls, his everything were about to disappear. He continued to plead with the banks. He held off 2 foreclosure deadlines, getting an extra day, an extra week, whatever. Meanwhile, the gymnasts went about their routines. Neither they nor their parents had any idea of how serious his predicament was. In Ireland for competition, Fong sat down on his laptop. I'm in Belfast right now, he typed. Still no financing. Really scary. He was as trapped as he had been when he had lost it all the first time. Worst case scenario, he went on. I've lived in my car before. I could do it again. More weeks went by. Then, with hope all but lost, Fong at last found the answer in his new familiar solution. He admitted that he couldn't do it on his own. In May, with every bank under the sun having rejected his loan application, Fong cast a Hail Mary to a friend of a friend involved in Kansas City real estate. He said he was willing to give up a stake in Gage in return for some help. It was a concession he'd never been able to muster. To his surprise, a deal was struck that paid off creditors and saved the gym. So Fong can train his future Olympians without distraction now, soaking in their laughter as they twist, leap, and roll. And yet, we've jumped one hurdle, he says, but we've got to continue to jump hurdles. It's always going to be like this. 1 year later, he breaks ground on the property. September 19th, 2007. ESPN writes a story on Al Fong. Here's a snippet. Over the past few years, hopefuls from all over the country, including Ivana Hong, a bronze medalist at the most recent Pan Am Games, have flocked to Gage to prepare to take on their best shot in 2008. I think Al is heading in the right direction, said Marta Crowley, women's team coordinator at USA Gymnastics. He'll probably place someone on the next Olympic team. So, with apologies to his former self, Al Fong has learned the hard way that sometimes you need to let girls be girls. But he also knows that when it's time to push, he will push, because underneath it all, he is a man hardwired to drive to the brink, to see dreams as someone else never achieved, only chased. So, why not let laughter fly? Gage operates out in an unfinished 25,000 square foot building just off of a quiet Missouri highway. I want Gage to be the epicenter of gymnastics in this country, Fong declares. A fully functional facility, pretty big enough to train 2 Olympic medalists, but not big enough for Fong's ultimate goal of becoming an American Bela Karolyi, sits unused next door. This temple to American gymnastics can ensure Fong's legacy, if it doesn't become his undoing first. He finished acquiring the land, which is now the new Gage, and broke ground less than a year later, before getting approved for construction loan. I thought, let's just get started, he says. I could feel 2008 knocking on the door. When Al and his wife first met, they each had a hole to fill. She was a former Soviet bloc gymnast looking for a place to pass along her craft. He was a distraught coach, clinging to a tattered career. Then, in 1996, not long after she arrived, their future walked through the door. Her name was Taryn Humphrey, and she wanted to be a gymnast. A coach never forgets the look of talent. In the first moments of viewing Humphrey, Fong knew he had been present with a kind of athlete he never had before. When he sat down with a 9-year-old and her parents, he used the word Olympics. The Humphreys were blown away, but they were also cautious. We were a little timid about going to see Al's gym at first, Taryn says. We'd heard the stories, but when we met him, we felt like he was a great person. Still, her mom, Lisa, came to the gym every day to keep an eye on her daughter. Eventually, she got a job there. She says she's yet to see a monster from the stories. By the time Humphrey arrived, Fong was already seeing that he couldn't do it alone. He needed his wife inside the gym and out. Before long, the two were more than coworkers. She was a first-class gymnast who, at 11, was the youngest ever in the Soviet Union to be named Master of the Sport. In her teens, she won gold in numerous international events, all while quietly enduring physical and emotional abuse from a hard-driving coach. When Al heard of the stories of that man, he thought of himself. He began to understand how he'd hurt the girls he'd pushed too hard. She absolutely changed me, he says. Some people, of course, refuse to believe the transformation. Henrich's mother said not too long ago that Fong still makes her skin crawl. And in the gymnastics community, his old rep sticks. People who knew him during the first rise still view him in that way, says Stroud. There are a lot of people who have no concept of how he is now. One visit to Fong's gym, though, shows that it isn't a gulag anymore. There is no yelling or screaming, he says. If anybody who knew me 20 years ago saw this, they'd say, bullshit. But the old Al Fong has not gone away forever. Sometimes traces of the old coach poke through, and it's hard to watch. Inside Gage, one afternoon this spring, an 11-year-old couldn't hit a bar maneuver. That's not right, Fong yelled. She made a pig face to the girls around her, who tittered. If you're not committed to hitting these, I understand, but you're shooting for the wrong level, he said, lowering his voice. Stay at a level where it doesn't matter, but it's not an elite level. You're not a kid anymore. The drill continued, but the chastised girl had vanished, crying, no doubt, after realizing that her friends were about to leave her behind. Sometime later that year, Gage struggles financially to stay open, though many people aren't aware of this. After the 2008 Olympic trials, Ivana Hong, recent alternate for the 2008 Olympics, leaves Al Fong's gym. She becomes a subject of rumor since she left Gage, where Al has trained a number of Olympians. The Hongs spoke to NBC Action News in an article later that year. It was pretty clear that something was wrong with Hong in the months that were leading up to trials, both mentally and physically. Fong stated, "It became blatant that she flat out quit. It was almost as we were taken down a deep, dark path." According to the Hongs, Fong discouraged Hong from seeking advice about her nagging ankle injury, which was in fact a fracture. Hong continued to train anyways. But according to Miss Hong, Fong stopped teaching Ivana. This is interesting, because it's the first time we've heard complaints about Fong in almost a decade. So we're left wondering if it was just a bad match in coaching, gymnastics, or parent styles. Around the same time, November 20th, Courtney defends Al in an interview in that same year regarding her departure. It is available on Flow Gymnastics. August 19th, 2009. A newspaper discusses Caitlin Ohashi's successful career as a junior elite in recent meets. Caitlin would eventually leave Gage, and to this day, we aren't sure why. October 18th, 2010. Al Fong closes his gym due to issues with the landlord. The closure is quick and leaves many employees, gymnasts, and parents concerned if they will be able to relocate or not. Parents state in a local news station they arrive at the gym with signs on the doors stating that they were permanently closed with no warning prior. The girls on the elite track resort to training at another gymnastic facility that is not owned by Gage for 8 months, while differences are worked out between the landlord and Al. May 17, 2011. Many articles discuss the grand opening of Gage. One discusses Taryn's support of reopening Gage. Others discuss their gymnast past success while training at another gym. One article sums up a lot of unanswered questions. Here's a summary. Scores of parents, coaches, and other volunteers began the daunting task of unloading 3 barns full of equipment had been stored since Gage owner Al Fong moved out of Blue Springs Gymnastics property in October 2010 over a financial dispute with landlord. When I left these 2 buildings, I never thought I would come back, Fong recalled. I had divorced myself in my mind from ever entering this site again. The last time we did this, we were packing all the gear into these trucks. Now we're unpacking it, and the emotions are hard to explain. We want everyone in Blue Springs to know that we are back, and that we need help, Fong said. We want to open both buildings by June 1st, and there is a lot of work to do. If any church or school has someone looking for community service, have them give me a call. Manual labor or any kind of donations will be appreciated because we have so much work to do. When the Gage building was closed, someone came in to vandalize electrical boxes. That's the first thing we have to do, the first thing we have to work on, because you can't see here at night. Fong, without warning, moved all of his equipment from the 2 buildings on October 18th. He posted a letter on Gage's door that read in part, "The landlord of our building has placed suppressive, unacceptable conditions on Gage, including extreme, above-market rent, and severe business restrictions that have caused us as a business to suffer under the economic times." The owner had stepped in to provide financial backing and help Gage keep the doors open in 2007. I had no notice they were moving out, and I did not kick them out. That's one rumor that's gone around, the landlord said in October of last year. When contacted on Monday, the owner gave his side, but said he did not want to go into detail. It did not end the way I'd hoped it would, the owner said on Monday. I believe the legal system failed. It's amazing how someone can sign a lease and agreements and walk away owing hundreds and thousands of dollars. Fong is now the sole owner of both buildings on the Gage site and said soon it will be a business as usual. This is just a great day for Gage and for the city of Blue Springs, said volunteer Nikki, who was helping with the move-in on Saturday. My 8-year-old daughter, Dylan, has been at Gage since she was 3. This is her second home, and I'm thrilled to be helping with the move, because this site was home to a lot of kids in the area. Gage employee Brandon Wallman said the move back to Gage was unexpected. Did I ever expect to be back at the site? No. I wish I could tell you how special it is, but I can't. I can't even come up with words to describe how I feel. July 27, 2011. The Examiner, a company who has interviewed Gage for 2 decades, discusses how Brenna Dowell and Maddie Desch and Sarah Finnegan are happy to be training at home again after resorting to another gym while dealing with legal battles. During the most demanding training time, these girls didn't have the facility. They were training somewhere else, Fong said, who returned to his Gage building, Northwest Jefferson Street in Blue Springs in May, after moving out in October 2010 in a financial dispute with his landlord. July 3, 2012. The Examiner publishes an article that Sarah Finnegan has made the 2012 Olympic team 2016 range. I'm not sure when he started this exactly, but this was as far back as I could go onto Al's Facebook. Al Fong introduces the Al Fong spotting block system, designed to make gymnasts train safer and easier to do this without injury. He uses this in many events, primarily in bars and beam. Since he is a popular coach who is promoting safety, some people may wonder if he is changing his ways and has learned from Jalissa's death by promoting safety before success. Others view it as a money grab and think that he is just like any other coach who is promoting safety while profiting off it. 2016 to 2017 range. Brenna speaks on an interview with a blogger on gymnastics. She states she has a good relationship and enjoyed her time at Gage years prior. August 14th, 2017. Caitlin Ohashi posts a story on her former coach, Al Fong. In the blog, she does not bash her former coach, but rather educates everyone on how Christy had passed in the eyes of what someone faces with an eating disorder. July 28th, 2018. At the U.S. Classics, Kara struggles on beam. You can see at the end Al Fong gripping her arm for a discussion. She stands alone for over 2 routines on that beam after her fall. 2020-2021 range. Kara and Leanne make the Olympic team as alternates. It isn't stated exactly when, but at the same time frame, Al Fong is under investigation by Safe Sport. Nobody is aware of this. He continues to coach and takes the girls to Tokyo. July 22nd, 2021. Kara gets COVID shortly after arriving at the Olympics. Since Leanne wasn't vaccinated, she is also withdrawn from competing as an alternate at the Olympics. Both girls' careers end, and they are immediately sent home with Al Fong when cleared. Al compares being stuck in the hotel room as a prison since he is unable to leave and see the full team. July 27th, 2021. Al Fong makes a statement about the twisties in support of Simone's decision to pull out of the Olympics. Many people compare Simone's scary vault to Jalissa's, who was forced to train a skill that she was not ready for. While Al does not make a reference to her like others, he does explain what the twisties are and shows great compassion on social media. Some other coaches do the same, while others make no comment. August 20th, 2022. A video is uploaded on Al Fong's Instagram. I wasn't aware of this until the day it was removed. According to what I've read, the video sounded like Al Fong was showing techniques, but spoke inappropriately, as if he was sexualizing gymnasts. A Reddit post was made from at least 2 people reporting Al's video to the center and to Chelsea Memel. Nothing was done from what I've been told. The video is immediately removed following the Reddit post being created. February 17th, 2023. It is made public that Al Fong is under investigation by Safe Sport. Some claim it is 30 reports, while other websites state it's 40. It is unclear of what was reported. What is clear is that Al's investigation started in 2020 and was delayed due to COVID and the Summer Olympics when 2 of his gymnasts qualified as alternates. The gym world is angered by his allowance to continue to coach when under investigation. He is not currently, nor has ever been posted on the Safe Sports database.